Our guest today claims that the animals in our world have spoken with a loud and clear voice. He says that all you have to do is look at the many unique differences with the enormous variety of animals to see that Darwinian evolution did not and could not have happened. Coming up next on today's edition of Origins, Evolution, Let the Animals Speak with Dr. Jerry Bergman. Hello, my friends, and welcome to Origins. My name's Donn Chapman, and it's my privilege to be your host. During this program, we showcase interesting guests who present evidence from science along with other important facts to validate the truth of creation and the accuracy of the Bible. Today's guest, Dr. Jerry Bergman, is one of our favorites, and he's known for his scientific research, making the front page of newspapers throughout the country many times. He's even been featured on Paul Harvey and nationally on NBC News. When he's not making headlines, he enjoys his hobbies of woodworking and photography. We're thrilled you're here today, my friend.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And we want to talk about animals talking today. Dr. Doolittle is with us. Evolution, let the animals speak. What does that mean?
What the animals are saying very clearly is we didn't evolve, we were created.
And the first animal we're going to talk about is the armadillo.
Armadillo, which should be well known among people, especially who live out in the West. But there it is, armadillo.
Yeah.
Strange looking animal, strange looking creature, and it has baffled evolutionists where it could come from. It's so much unlike any other animal that we know of. And of all living animals, one research scientist said, few are as amazing as the armadillo. And the earliest the person who did classify in taxonomy, Linnaeus, he said he was puzzled about how we could classify that strange-looking mammal. So he had a hard time classifying it. Where does it go? Is it a mammal? Is it a reptile? What is it? Is it a dinosaur? Whatever. And we know they're shy. They're very timid animals. And mammologist David Lamp, he says they're bizarre. Well, I'm not sure if bizarre fits, but, well, it might. Look at this picture here. Armadillos, they can actually, some types, they can actually fold up into a round ball you see here.
Now, that's the same creature. He can
same creature.
Get himself in those 4 different positions.
Folds right up, right, and almost like a clock that folds into a case. And the better picture there, you can see when they're all folded up, that's what they look like.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing that inside there is an animal. Perfectly round, almost perfectly round ball. And this evolution of the armadillo, of course, has baffled Darwinists. And we don't even have a clue. I've tried to find what they hypothesize they evolved from, and no one knows. I mean, they can't even guess what it evolved from. And the armor plates are unique, and of course, armor plates, well, the armor, period, preserves very well in the fossil record. So indeed, if they evolve, we should see evidence of their slow evolution. We should see the design changes from a non-armored mammal to a modern armadillo. And
are there lots of fossils of armadillos because of the hard shell?
Oh, lots of fossils. That's not the problem. The problem is we don't find any that fit the theory of evolution.
None of them have ever evolved, so to speak.
The evolutionists would say, well, let's just keep looking. And maybe someday we'll find evidence for them. But they don't know why. There's no evidence in the fossil record because they should preserve fairly well. And one thing, if you think about a non-armored animal with an armored animal, there's major mechanical changes that have to occur so that they can have this armor and breathe and so on. When you breathe, your chest expands. Well, they have a problem with that because the armadillo shell is not very flexible. And so the design of breathing and escaping enemies, even reproduction, is very different than all other known mammals. And again, we should see evidence in the fossil record, but what do we see? No evidence at all in the fossil record for their evolution. And not even a hint. And now they found one possibility called a Glyptodon. And a Glyptodon is an extinct animal, and I'll let you judge whether or not you think armadillos could evolve from a Glyptodon. And they look somewhat like a cross between a turtle and armadillo. and about the same size as a beetle, and I'll show you pictures so you
Of a Volkswagen beetle. This is a big creature.
A Volkswagen beetle, right. Now, here it's hard to tell how large they are. They could be, you know, 8 inches long, but now we have one in a museum, and there you can see it's a pretty good-sized creature.
Now, that's not plaster Paris. That's an actual animal.
That's actual, the shell and so on, and the skull and so on is real. In fact, they haven't really covered the bones, so we have the bones and the shell.
That's an amazing creature. Now, that looks kind of dinosaurish.
Right, and that would probably be the best explanation, is where they came from. They evolved from the dinosaurs. But again, no evidence.
Yeah.
It's speculation. Turtles, the next one I'll talk about, some of the same problems. Turtles have a shell. Lots of different kinds of turtles in the fossil record. Some are aqueous, they swim. You can see the fin design is quite different than a land turtle. And they're turtles, this is an adult turtle. You can see how small it is. Compared to this man's finger, it's probably, well, about as wide as a thumb. And then there's this turtle, which that now looks like a crocodile-type turtle. And that is, the shell is very, very different. The shell, by the way, there's enormous variety in the shells of turtles. But nonetheless, they all preserve very well in the fossil record. And we have found lots of fossil turtles. In fact, there are enormous numbers of fossil turtles. But what do we find? The earliest turtle is a turtle. And we don't see any evidence for their evolution. And when you study turtles, you can see that the anatomy and physiology is drastically different than anything we know. In fact, turtles are probably closest to armadillos, but yet nobody claiming that turtles evolved in armadillos or vice versa. The next one I'll look at is a platypus, and that is a corundum for evolution. In fact, when it was first brought to Europe from Africa, it was called a strange creature. In fact, one of the strangest creatures that ever existed. And indeed, when you study it, you realize that it is very, very strange. Why? Because it possesses all kinds of unique features and genes that are typical but yet very different of mammals, reptiles, and birds.
3 whole different categories. It sort of fits all of them, but really doesn't fit any of them.
Yeah. So if you wanted to claim it's a reptile, you could. You want to claim it's a bird, you could, although there are many differences between birds and platypus, but nonetheless, as I mentioned a second ago, when a pelt was sent from Australia to the United Kingdom, the late 1700s, the scientists were convinced this has to be a hoax. It couldn't be real. It's just some good taxidermist put it all together. And when you look at it, you can see why they would conclude that. Robert Knox later on, he said it was produced by an Asian taxidermist who was very talented. And there you can see a good picture of the black platypus, duck-billed platypus.
Are there lots of platypuses today?
A fair number amount. Now, these, of course, are pretty small.
It's not extinct, but there are lots of platypuses.
There are a fair number, of course, primarily in Australia.
Right.
But like many animals, they're concerned about the extinction rate because they're hunted for their meat and so on. And farmers sometimes kill them because they affect streams and the water supply and so on. But that's a duck-billed platypus.
Now, where do they put them? I mean, everything has to get categorized somewhere, doesn't it, scientifically?
Well, they had a problem with that, and so guess what? They created a whole new category.
It's a thing all
by itself.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't fit it in any other category. And let me try to explain why. Lays eggs like a bird.
Right.
So it has a bird trait. Has milk glands like a mammal. So it should be a mammal, but they felt it's so different from a mammal that we can't classify it as such. And has a duck bill, which of course resembles a duck. And the duck bill looks like a glove slipped onto its head. So it doesn't look like it even belongs to the animal. Thick waterproof coat of hair. And that is important because it does spend a lot of time in the water, and therefore it has to be protected from the water. And there's a layer of air that helps protect it from the water. And has a reptile-like skeleton, so now we've got reptile traits. And flat beaver-like tail, so we're back to a mammal. And an inner clavicle bone, which is a reptile trait, and is found in no other marsupial or even placentile. So here we have a trait which is found only among reptiles, as far as we know, and yet it's not a reptile from what we've classified as.
Now, wouldn't the evolutionists say, well, this is a transitional form from one to the other? Or wouldn't that be a way for them to explain this?
Well, they would find it's a good transitional form, but it's still around.
Yeah.
Transitional form, by definition, has to be a transition between one animal to the other, and of course, it's still around, so
We
they
need
can't
to see nothing this came from or nothing that is going to.
Yeah, so we can't classify it as that such. Now, I mentioned a second ago about the platypus, and echina are the only known mammals that do not dream while sleeping, which is kind of an interesting
Now, how
fact
do we know that?
Came up. Well, when an animal dreams, you can measure that by measuring brain waves,
Okay.
alpha waves, beta waves, and so on, so delta waves. And this is one of the most intriguing things. Most mammals have either XY for a male and XX chromosomes for a female. But a male animal in this case is either 5 X chromosomes, which produces females, or 5 Y chromosomes, which produces males.
So they're all the same.
Which, yeah, in that sense they are.
Huh.
And that's been baffling, and I know of no other animal that has this trait. I mean, why have 5? Why not?
Yeah.
Why not just have 1? But now they have the males have both X and Y, and the females have both X and Y, but it's the number of the X and the Y which stands them apart. And the male is venomous ankle spurs that secrete toxins, unique to platypus. Again, no other animal has this trait. And they also produce severe pain, and this is one of the main ways of protecting themselves from their enemies. And all these unique traits, where do you classify them? It's a problem we mentioned. And here we go, a few more unique traits. Has a body like a fish, large 4 feet like a duck. Tail allows it to accurately and rapidly maneuver through the water like a fish. And it also has, I think, supports what they call message creation theory. Message creation theory is the idea that God created life to look like it did not evolve. In many forms of life, apparent did not evolve, and this was deliberate by God. This is called the message theory.
So it's kind of like God's looking down through history, and he knows we're going to come up with evolution someday. So he makes an animal like this to sort of say, this just absolutely throws all of your man-made theories into chaos.
Exactly. Just as I'm going to make an animal that's going to confound you, and you'll never be able to
that's the word.
Come up with an evolutionary theory. So, and of course we mentioned the receptors in its bill. It does have the duck bill. And the receptors uses electroreception, unique to monotremes. And they can distinguish between living and non-living creatures. And that's how they use this electroreception system, which is in itself very, very complex and proposes a big problem for Darwinists. And so, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, didn't know where to put it, so we create a whole new classification. And guess what? This is called a monotreme, and it includes only 2 animals, the duck-billed platypus and the echidnas. That's it. That's the whole member of this classification. And so, and of course, where the echidnas come from is another problem they have yet to figure out, which we'll talk about.
That's another problem. Well, we have to take a break and we'll be back, but I have some questions about what all of this says to us about the future and what it says about the whole debate that we're in. Don't you go away. We'll be right back. We are back at Origins with Dr. Jerry Bergman. We're talking about animals that show that evolution couldn't have happened. And we were talking about the platypus, and I apologize, I cut you off before the last slide. You're going to talk about the electrodes in its bill.
Yeah, electroreceptors.
Electroreceptors.
Which are really receptors.
Receptors.
And how that works is that all animals with a nervous system, the nervous system works by electricity. It actually can be picked up by a sensor which picks up electricity. Well, they have a system which basically is like a voltmeter. It picks up, except it's very, very sensitive. It picks up the electricity given off by animals that have a nervous system, and that way it knows if it's near something edible or if there's a rock nearby. They don't want to start, digging holes and looking for rocks. They want to find living animals. So once they pick up the signal, the electrical signal, they monitor this, and then they determine whether or not they want to consume the animal they found.
So we can spend millions of dollars building a machine that will register brain waves, which is electronic.
Which is what it does.
It's exactly. But here is an animal in the wild that does that probably better than we do and quicker than we do. It's just part of the equipment God gave him.
That's true, and to explain it by evolution is a problem because that system is useless until the whole thing is developed.
Yeah.
In fact, worse than useless until the whole thing's developed.
Right. It doesn't work partly while it's developing.
No, and why would it pick up electrical fields? What purpose would there be? How would that be a benefit until the whole system was developed so they would know that this means there's a living animal, living insect or crustacean, whatever, nearby?
That's a very powerful point. It goes back to Dr. Behe's argument that it doesn't work partially while it's going down the road. You don't grow cylinders in a car. You don't grow these electronic systems partially. It's all of a sudden it's all there or it isn't there.
You have to have the whole thing before it'll function.
Yeah.
Right?
So what a fascinating animal. You were telling me that when you were a young boy, you saw one, stuffed one at a museum, and it had an impact on you.
At University of Michigan, and I was 8 or 9, I guess, and I never forget that.
Yeah.
I looked at it, and it looked like a fake, and I asked, is this a fake? Is this a joke? And they said, nope, this is a real animal, and taxidermists did a good job, and this is exactly what they look like in real life.
Did you know you were going to be a scientist when you were 8 or 10?
I always had an interest in science, and I was reared on science films. My dad was a research engineer, did experimental evaluations for the automotive industry, and that's what we had around the house. We talked about science.
So it's been in you from the very beginning.
The very, very beginning, yeah.
Well, now we're going to talk about kiwi and not the fruit.
Yeah, kiwi is an animal which is fascinating because, I'll show you the slide here, because there we go, and you can see how different it looks, which obviously quite different, but one of the most intriguing things about it is you'll notice the egg is almost as large as the animal.
Wow.
Now, how an animal could carry and deliver an egg that large has baffled evolutionists. The theory is that this animal was once 5 times as large, and the animal shrunk through evolution, but the egg didn't shrink.
You see a lot of shrinking in evolution these days?
A lot of shrinking, a lot of getting larger. Yeah, that's a...
I'm sorry. Well, I look at that picture, I'm thinking about that poor chicken or that poor thing laying an egg, and I'm just saying, ouch. It just looks like a painful process.
And there's the egg, by the way.
Yeah.
You can see in a hand.
That's quite
you can
an egg.
see it's a handful.
Wow. So talk to me about the kiwi.
And kiwi, again, is unique. They have no evidence for evolution. It's a flightless terrestrial bird found only in New Zealand. It's endemic to New Zealand. And Darwin used this, believe it or not, as an example of loss of function due to evolution. He claimed it used to fly around when it was larger, and it lost its wings, and for no purpose, he said, and yet this is an example of de-evolution. We know de-evolution, loss of wings is one example, is true. We've verified that. But whether this animal lost its wings, I don't know. But when they say it's useless is wrong because it's very useless to walk around. You notice the body is pretty large compared to the thin feet. Well, to balance itself, it has to have the so-called vestigial wings to be able to walk around. And it zooms around pretty fast. It's really a very...
So our error is assuming that all wings are for flight. Some could be for balance.
Many
God
are
can
for
make
balance.
things for different reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they work very well for what they do. And without them, they would not survive very well at all.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So the idea that they lost their wings, again, there's no evidence in the fossil record, or otherwise. We have no evidence whatsoever. It's a hypothesis. Well, not even a hypothesis, it's a guess. Uninformed guess. And the first kiwi, from all that we know, was a kiwi. We do have kiwis in the fossil record, but again, there's no evidence of their evolution. But they are preserved not real well. Birds are not preserved very well. But by the way, some British scientists said this animal is impossible. It's impossible. And he meant that because how could this animal exist the way it is, like a mermaid and a unicorn? How could it survive? Well, how could it lay these eggs?
But that's a nonsensical statement because we know they do exist.
It does survive. It's a fascinating animal.
Yeah.
And it has whiskers like a cat, I could add. It burrows like a groundhog. Same with the duck-billed platypus. It has so many traits that are typical of non-birds in this case, since it is classified as a bird. And has nostrils are at the tip of its beak. And long, thin beak, you remember from the first picture, that's where its nostrils are, which doesn't seem to us very logical, but yet for a bird that needs to figure out what is around it, it can stick its long nostrils on the tip of his beak into various places and determine whether or not there is a food that's appropriate for its diet. So, by the way, its organ of smell is really very accurate, very good.
I'll bet.
And here's the eggs which incubated by males, not by females, which is another problem. And it's about 75 days incubation. Imagine taking this long to incubate the eggs. And the males, by the way, are on their own. They leave to get food and return to care for the eggs. So, a little switcheroo here.
Yeah.
Not many examples of this, but there are a few. Like seahorses are another example where the males basically take care of the brood. Huh. Which, again, they have a hard time explaining. And Gould, Stephen Jay Gould, I could mention, concluded the greatest of kiwi oddities centers upon its reproduction. And he explains in detail why the reproduction is so unique and so different, so hard for evolutionists to explain. And lays eggs like a bird, but lacks a bird's tail and wings. So, well, they claim they're vestigial. That's what they claim. And body surface is more like fur than feathers, similar to juvenile down of most other birds. And so that's another unique feature of the kiwi. And we could go on, but...
Now you said other birds, so do they classify it as a bird?
It's classified as a bird.
Okay.
You know, where else do you put it? It's most logically be part of the bird family. In fact, they say it's the world's most unbird-like bird. Most unbird-like bird. And we can see an evaluation of it that's quite clear.
And one more thing you have for us.
I thought I would at least need to get one plant in there, and this is the Venus flytrap, which I think has fascinated many people for many years. When I was younger, it was fascinating. Get a fly and just put it on the catcher part, and you can see how that works. But what's unique about it, it's not found anywhere in the world except one very small part of South Carolina. And there, looking at the trap, you can see these hairs, and it will not close unless two of them are triggered within a very short period of time. So it's got a clock in there. One is triggered, and if the other isn't triggered within a certain period of time, it doesn't close.
It's sort of like a double tap you have to have on the computer screen. Yeah.
And that prevents it from closing unnecessarily.
Yeah.
If a leaf blows against it, it doesn't close and waste its energy. So it only closes when there is a fly or when a researcher pushes both triggers, then it will close, which makes it fascinating. And it's a really beautiful plant, very popular. And you can see from this picture here how attractive they are. South Carolina, there's a small area where they're grown.
These animals don't seem to fit the picture. But I've asked you this question on different shows in different contexts. When you confront the evolutionists with them, the answer is always, we just haven't spent enough government money doing research yet.
Yep,
is that pretty much it?
They say, don't, we'll keep looking. They have what I call evolution glasses. They see the world through evolution, and they can't see the world in any other way. So when you point out these problems, they say, well, we'll keep looking. You know, we've only been around doing this for 150 years since Darwin proposed his theory, so give us another 300 years and maybe we'll find evidence for these creatures. But what happens is, the more we study these and other creatures, the more problems we find. I've done about 60 articles which deal with these same types of problems, and every one of them, no evidence in the fossil record, number one, and number two, such a contrast between them and all other living animals that evolution simply cannot explain it. And many admit that evolution cannot explain the origin of these animals.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. These are good examples, but you sure haven't exhausted your list, have you?
Oh, I have many more examples.
Yeah.
I use these because they were convenient and
they're a lot of fun to look at.
Yeah.
So didn't Darwin himself say that if after a period of time the fossil record didn't validate his theory, that we would have to say the theory was not correct?
Yeah. In fact, it's said that if Darwin was alive today, he would reject his theory. He would see the evidence as overwhelming against his theory, and therefore he himself, based on his own criteria, to prove evolution, you have to prove this, this, and this. And today we have shown this, this, and this have been disproved. So he himself today, if he was honest, he would have to look at his own work and say, my theory has been falsified by my own criteria that I used.
Well, you're an honest man, Dr. Bergman, and you have brought us some facts that I'm thankful that we have scientists like you that are willing to look at the truth and then speak that truth in love. And so I'm just grateful for you and for your work and for you coming and sharing with us today. Friends, you know, we're told over and over that evolution's a fact, that it's already been proven. But we're always told that by people who really don't know the evidence. They say that if you're speaking and you don't have enough facts, pound the table. And that's so often what happens with our evolutionary friends. The less facts they have, the more adamant they become, the more dictatorial they become, the more authoritarian they become because they don't like answering questions they don't have answers for. I'm so thankful we have a God who has answers. And if we'll just be objective, we'll see the clear truth that God made the heaven and the earth. It's still His view that He created you. And that should be your worldview too. Hope to see you again soon here on Origins. And until then, God bless you, my friend.
Thank you for watching this edition of Origins. If you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint information presented today, you can download a PDF file from our website at originstv.org. Or for a DVD of this series, you can order online or send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins Program, number 1607, Cornerstone Network, Wall, Pennsylvania 15148.
Origins is made possible by the faithful prayers and financial support of you, our Cornerstone family.